Moon Knight is a character who is known to be tapped into the mystical arts. Conan is a character from an ancient age, also tapping into the mystical arts that he hates. What if the two of them, due to magic, were forced to team up? This is the Serpent War from Comicstorian, our main channel where we discuss all things comics. Well, when we make them into full stories, we move them over here to the Comicstorian Full Story channel. I hope you guys enjoy.
Cross Plains, Texas, 1936. The night is dark and a soft glow of light can be seen through the small cabin's windows. Inside, James Addison tosses in his bed, sweat dripping from his forehead. His dreams are not peaceful. He can see his past lives, previous incarnations of his grand existence. He has died many times, in many ways, but this time might be the last. A voice speaks in his mind. "Remember your sins," it whispers. He remembered his tribe going through the woods, yet he was injured and forced to stay behind. When he had finally recovered, he followed his tribe into the valley that the Picts warned them was cursed, and there he found his tribesmen, dead. Yet the forest in the ground seemed to pulse and move. The great serpent was known as Setha, lashing out from the woods to attack Addison. Yet he managed to slay the creature. Though now it was known as Setha, its true name was Set, the great snake that binds the world. The image shifts and Addison finds himself walking through a graveyard, yet he is someone he doesn't recognize. A warrior of the moon, Mark Spector, blessed and cursed to serve the god Khonshu. He is known as Moon Knight. The voice speaks in Addison's mind again, telling him to call to Moon Knight to show him what they face. The snakes suddenly surround Moon Knight, crawling over his body, and Mark Spector sits up in his bed, awakened by the nightmare. Before him floats the ghostly image of Khonshu. "Awaken, Mark Spector," the god commands, and Khonshu felt the disturbance of the terrible dream, knowing that it brings dread and prophecy. "You must investigate its source in my stead. Act as my feet and fist once more," Khonshu commands. The god raises, ordering Mark to serve him. In his bed, Addison continues to sleep. The night has joined their cause, but the voice continues to speak. They must find others to join in their fight against Set. Something begins to crawl up the blanket as Addison tosses and turns, and he sees another, a steel-eyed savior on an endless quest to cleanse the land of evil, Puritan and Protector, Solomon Kane. Dunbar Castle, Northumberland, 1584. The man shrinks back into the darkness in fear as Solomon Kane prepares to enter the dark castle. Dark forces lurk in dark spaces, my friend. If we cannot confront them here, in their shadows, then their powers over us will only grow, Kane tells him. Solomon draws his rapier as they push into the castle, the lantern lighting the path for them. But as the man prepares to open the door, a snake leaps out, biting him on the hand. Solomon Kane moves to defend the poor villager, slashing the snake through with his blade. Solomon leans down to check on the man's health, only to see a light glowing from the room. What kind of unholy light shudders from the beyond? He whispers in the dark. Meanwhile, Addison tosses in his bed. "Very good, James. The paladin will quest for us soon," the voice whispers to him. Slimy tendrils beginning to work their way up his leg as the voice speaks, ordering him to keep searching. "Another warrior. We need another warrior," James mumbles. "A fiery warrior, committed to a life of freedom through steel and sweat." She fights on a muddy road in France. 1522, 7 miles south of Canal du Coeur Poitou-Charentes. Dark Agnes cuts another of the would-be assassins, allowing them to taste the steel of her blade. She moves to protect her friend Etienne as he is wounded. With the assassins dead, the two limp down the road. Night begins to fall around them as they reach a nearby village. Strange lights shimmering past the witching hour. But where are the villagers? Agnes questions as they limp in. Suddenly the village is alive, townsfolk slipping out of the shadows surrounding the two travelers. "We're here, Agnes, awaiting your arrival," one of them states. "How do you know my name?" she questions, but the villagers all grasp at her, surrounding her tighter and tighter. "Our god told us!" they echo to her. She fights through them until she reaches a glowing cauldron. "You are our sacrifice," the townsfolk tell her. From the glowing pot, a great serpent arises, the creature wearing the mask of a golden human face as it stares at Agnes. Meanwhile, Conan the Barbarian sits up in his bed, a curse on his lips. He dresses and heads down from his room, joining those already within the tavern. It is now the Hyborian Age, the village of Mona. James Addison is watching in his dreams as the barbarian from times forgotten makes his way through the village of Mona. He has fought against the forces of Set before, and he believes that he can outrun destiny. Yet he sees the forces of the snake god everywhere, even in the faces of innocence. Conan continues to travel, the sky growing dark, the rain pelting down upon him. He finally cannot go on, taking shelter in a nearby cave. Just a moment's rest, he whispers to himself. Connect him to the others, the voice commands James Addison. Conan draws his blade as a strange light and swirling mist begin to fill the cave. Meanwhile, back in the present day, Moonlight opens a door in Cross Plains, Texas. Are you sure that this is the right place, Khonshu? He asks quietly. The house is empty, covered in dust and sheets, worn in time. He looks outside the window, seeing a strangely robed figure moving through a graveyard. Say away, Moonling. Your god will serve ours in days to come, they shout at him. Meanwhile, in 1984, Solomon Kane steps through the doorway, finding a group of cultists removing a corpse from a coffin. He draws his rapier and leaps in at the robed figures, but over in 1522, Dark Agnes leaps out of the way of the serpent's attacks. She manages to grab a blade, plunging it into the creature's thick scales, and over in the Hyborian Age, the strange mist reveals a massive serpent, its face hidden by a golden mask. Conan does not hesitate, leaping at the monster, driving his sword into its thick scales. Lightning cracks as the creature begins to tighten around him. Dark Agnes moves as the creature begins to tighten around her. Across the ages, the heroes are fighting against the forces of Set. The convergence has begun, and James Addison sees it all. In his bed, the strange tendrils begin to tighten around his limbs. He begins to glow. Lightning strikes. He is James Addison. He is forever. Smoke suddenly fills the room, and Solomon Kane shouts for the cultists. And when the smoke clears, he finds Moon Knight standing before him. The bright light fills the room, and Conan curses the magic. When the light disappears, he stands before Dark Agnes. Stygia, the village of Tazunar, the Hyborian Age. Priestess Satine walks through the village. She brings the water to the sick, brushing off their cries of her sainthood. She calls for good fortune to the children she passes and waves to those who greet her. Finally, she enters the temple of her god. Purify my soul and keep me safe, Set, the god of the endless coil, the lord of the blessed lands under the sun and moon, she prays. Suddenly, a multi-headed snake raises up before the woman, the serpents swaying back and forth, and a voice calls to Satine's mind. You have been loyal and fervent, focused, pure. A task is needed, so a task you will perform, the voice tells her, as she falls to her knees, bowing before her god. The great serpent tells the priestess that a pair of warriors draw near. She must protect a bracelet that has been passed down through her family for generations. The relic must be protected at all costs, body and soul, the serpents warn her. Satine nods her head. Of course, thine will be done, the snake is eternal, she whispers. Meanwhile, inside the cave in the Kapesh Mountains, Conan holds out his hand as Agnes reaches for the golden mask that has fallen to the floor. Cursed, I wouldn't touch that mask if I were you, red hair, he warns her. Agnes nods, knowing the monster that Conan speaks of. She stands, drawing her own sword. Your muscles tighten. Do you intend to kill me? She questions. I take no joy in it, but I will do what I must if the devil's magic takes you, he warns her. She nods and the two introduce themselves. Agnes does not take her eyes from Conan, warning him that if he raises his blade to her, he'd better stab her deep. You won't get a second chance, she warns. Meanwhile, over in England, 1584, Solomon Kane looks on as Moon Knight leans over the body that the cultists had pulled out of the mausoleum. If you were fighting the snake guys, then I think we're on the same side, Moon Knight tells the Puritan warrior, and the two introduce themselves to each other, though Solomon does not lower his blade. If your beliefs include purging evil, then we need not cross swords. But if I find that you are corrupt, then I will not hesitate to slay you, Solomon warns him. Across both times, the golden mask and the corpse begin to speak with the same voice. Warriors, I call out to you from beyond time, beyond life itself. But neither Conan nor Solomon will allow sorcery or desecration to betray them. Conan lashes out, stomping on the golden mask, while across time, Solomon's blade cuts the head off the corpse's body, yet both continue to speak. A moment's violence will not satisfy forces held fast to this fate. Heed my words and all of us may yet be saved, the mask in the head sang. The voice warns that Set has wrapped the world in its coil, poisoning the weak and burning the hearts and minds of the strong. It bites throughout the ages, feeding across all reality. Left unanswered, the snake will consume all. In my time, I am called James Addison, and we have been gathered together across time to battle this threat, to purge this world. Together, we may yet defeat the Serpent. Will you accept my aid and join this quest? James asks through his mediums. Solomon and Moon Knight stand together. I have sworn to destroy evil such as you described, but I am wary of words spouted by a crumbling corpse, Solomon says simply. Moon Knight nods, explaining that he's been pulled through these sorts of quests before. He's asking nice for now, but it'll get nasty if we refuse, he explains. Meanwhile, across time, no man or mystic tells me what I am or where I must go. Agnes shakes her head, and Conan nods, asking, why would I fight against the forces of Set again? I cannot control the road of dark destiny that has been laid out before us. If we do not travel together, I know all will be lost, Addison warns. Images begin to flash of Solomon Kane walking through the countryside engulfed in flames, of Mark Spector trapped in the mental ward, of Agnes in chains, her freedom taken from her, and Conan kneeling before dark wizards. We can stop this! We are all servants in our own way. Help me bring hope in the ever-dimming world, James implores them. Solomon finally nods, accepting James' strange guidance. Until God wills it otherwise. Conan finally agrees. But cross me at your own peril, he warns. And as the two pairs of heroes venture forth, a strange voice congratulates James for bringing them to their side. Conan and Agnes begin to travel throughout the Hyborian Age, fighting to earn coin for their journey. Solomon Kane and Moon Knight travel throughout the English countryside, fighting against highwaymen who attempt to take their lives. Days pass as Conan and Agnes travel throughout the desert, the woman questioning Conan, asking if he believes that they can kill a god. If we can touch them, they can be hurt as well, he tells her. When suddenly they feel the ground shake and Conan leaps to knock Agnes aside as a massive serpent breaks the surface of the sand, its jaws biting down on their horses, tearing them apart. More damn snakes! Agnes curses. Conan doesn't hesitate though, drawing his blade. You said you were deadly with a blade. Time to prove it, he shouts as he runs forward, his blade biting into the scales of one of the creatures, drawing a bright green blood. Agnes draws her own blade, attacking the same monster that devoured their steeds. In a matter of moments, both serpents have been beheaded by the warriors. From one of the corpses, Conan pulls out a green stone as large as his hand. Set's adventure in stone, a worthy artifact in your quest to weaken the serpent god's might, James says through the mask. Conan looks at the rock, asking if they should smash it, but James orders them to feed it to the fire under the light of the moon and let him do the rest. Moon Knight and Solomon Kane wait for passage over at a campfire for the night when suddenly the flame roars with a green flame and both heroes are startled. Good news, one of Set's objects of power has been cleansed by our allies, James says through the corpse's head. He tells the two heroes that their next objective is close, and in the distance, Kane sees the ship of his friend drawing close to the shore. Suddenly, cannons boom and an explosion throws the two heroes apart. Moon Knight doesn't hesitate, rushing forward and leaping onto the deck of the ship. I don't know what madness possessed you to fire on us, but... Mark begins, but the crew has the eyes of the serpent and rush towards him. Shouting that the hero's souls have been captured by the worm, one of the crew leaps at him, ready to plunge a knife into Moon Knight's back, but a pistol shot echoes in the darkness and the man falls. Foolhardy, Solomon hisses, and as the crew begins to retreat, Moon Knight points one of the cannons at the deck of the ship and lights it. The explosion throws him clear, and Kane moves quickly to pull the man out of the shallows of the ocean. You're insane, Moon Man. Insane, but effective, Moon Knight moans, and as they make their way to the beach, Moon Knight questions Solomon about the worm. Does any of it make sense to you? He asks as he tells Solomon what the crew said. No, Solomon Kane simply says, shaking his head. Meanwhile, in Cross Plains, Texas, 1928, the large, fat worms crawl under the book collection of James Addison. Worm. Where has he heard that before? He thinks to himself that it's Foggy, how one of his past lives has died. But the voice speaks in his mind again, ordering him to forget the past, to focus on the now. Together, we can slay the snake. There is nothing else, the voice tells him. What about the worm? James asks. There is no worm, the voice tells him. So James sleeps on, yet worms wriggle around his bed and the great creature encircles him. In the darkness of the night, Conan and Agnes watch from the shadows of a cave as a coach rides beneath them. The Serpent cultists look up sharply as the Cimmerian and the French woman descend upon them, blades already drawn. As Agnes begins to quickly dispatch cultist after cultist, Conan slashes one across the chest and steals their horse. But the snake men continue to fight, pulling the barbarian from his new steed. Conan does not relent though, cracking two of the Serpent men's heads together. Another goes to stab him in the back, but an explosion rips through the canyon as Agnes fires her pistol. "That was you?" Conan asks in awe as his sword dispatches the wounded snakeman. "Yes, an error of sorts," Agnes tells him. A final cultist remains, and the Serpent man is quick to surrender to the two warriors. Conan pulls back the covering of the cart, wishing to see what required so much protection. "Burial urns? What's inside of them? Jewels? Potions?" he asks. As Agnes threatens their prisoner, he reveals that the urns hold the hearts of his master, so that he may be immortal. That they are going to bring them to a vault in Stygia. Lock them away, safe. Conan turns back to the cart, quickly smashing the oil lamp on the wood. "Well, it's either foul magic or you're insane. Either way, it deserves to burn," he snaps as the cart goes up in flames. "The Great Serpent will curse you for this!" the cultist shouts as he falls to his knees, but Agnes merely smirks. "Oh, we're well past that, little man." Meanwhile, in one of the dark temples, unholy priests suddenly begin to convulse and die. As Conan begins to gather weapons, Agnes questions the cultists, demanding to know the location of the vault that they were headed to. Swiftly, Agnes and Conan travel across the plains through the marshes of the land of Stygia. They discover the vault is well guarded, though it means little to the brutal warriors, and inside they find the vast treasure of the Great Set, and it burns as well as anything else. Meanwhile, Moon Knight and Solomon Kane continue their crusade across Europe. They discover many secrets and tomes of Set, destroying them as they continue onward. Soon, they find themselves outside a temple in Italy, with James continuing to speak to them through the corpse's head. He tells them that a powerful magic relic can be found inside, a bracelet with a twin in another time and place. "We must destroy both simultaneously to wound our enemy," James informs them. "The god of snakes reels from our attack across ages. This blow will be enough to force him to the surface." Moon Knight and Kane leap down into the city streets, soon finding themselves at the entrance of the temple, preparing for battle. For a brief moment, Mark Spector wonders why Khonshu has been so quiet since the beginning of this quest, yet he doesn't have time to find the answers. And in another age, Conan and Agnes are looking down on a temple. The gold mask echoes what it told Kane and Moon Knight, and within the temple they find a bracelet that they must destroy. Another location, another trinket. How will we know when we've destroyed them all? Agnes demands. Once again, James echoes his words to Agnes and Conan, promising that the snake god might surface. They descend into the city streets and move through the temple. Standing at the entrance, they prepare for battle. Meanwhile, across time and space, Moon Knight and Kane also move quickly inside, fighting against the cultists that they find within. Yet at the entranceway with Conan and Agnes, the cultists are flooding out, spurred onward by a priestess of Set. "Slay the infidels in the name of the Great Serpent!" she shouts, and the believers surround Agnes, pulling her weapons from her hands. "Deluded fools! You serve evil itself!" she shouts at them, with Conan continuing to fight, his sword hacking through the flesh of any who are foolish enough to get close to him. Inside their own temple, Moon Knight and Kane are doing far better. Moon Knight punching another cultist, telling Kane that they need to stop whatever magic the snake men are working on. Suddenly, a massive hulking creature stands ready to fight. "Too late!" Moon Knight notes as he leaps at the creature. Meanwhile, over with Conan, he steps forward with his blade. "We've come for the bracelet, witch. Hand it over and keep every limb you were born with," he orders the priestess. She holds out her hand and a large serpent uncoils from her arm, hissing at the Cimmerian. "I have Satine, priestess of the serpent, and I swear upon my life you will not have it," she hisses. The serpent leaps forward, ignoring Conan's words, sinking its teeth into his forearm. The barbarian stumbles for a moment before the poison overwhelms him and he sinks to his knees. "The barbarian lies dying, Great Set. I sacrifice him to your glory," she prays, but a voice suddenly calls to her. "Not yet, loyal servant," Set commands. Meanwhile, in Cross Plains, Texas, the Great Worm continues to writhe and curl around James Addison. The room was filled with a blue light as the worm pulses, and it can feel the great change, the fall of Set. "My kingdom shall ascend. I will be triumphant," the voice calls to James. "You have served me well. Pray that the next time that we meet, when I am all-powerful in this realm, I choose to be merciful to your past transgressions." The worm rumbles and then it vanishes. James opens his eyes, his mind returning to him. "Oh God, it's gone. My mind is clear. It used me to build its kingdom, the kingdom of the worm."
Meanwhile, in a temple in Italy, Mark Spector's mind is suddenly filled with a familiar voice.
Listen carefully and follow my command. Place the bracelet on your wrist,
Khonshu orders him. Mark pauses, telling his god how crazy that is.
If you do not, we fail. We have come undone. This is the only way,
Khonshu informs him. Moon Knight places the bracelet on his hand, screaming as the energy swells through his body. We were all used, James warns the group of heroes through the head and the mask. Suddenly, Mark Spector finds himself in a strange land. Pyramids and other structures lay in the distance as he walks forward. Another dream? He questions, but suddenly he stops. Looking up, he sees the great Set with its coils around Khonshu. Conan stands nearby, his blade hacking and slashing at the snakes that wrap around him.
This is no dream, Mark Spector. Welcome to the true war,
Set rumbles at the warrior. Cross Plains, Texas. No longer under the control of the Great Worm, James Addison finally remembers one of his past lives, that the great god was hiding from him, that he was a tribesman of Nord. He slew Setha, the great serpent, but the snake was not his target. He took the venom from its fangs and dipped his arrows in it, and with that venom he took his revenge. He hunted the valley where he knew his foe would be. It slew his countrymen, slew their wives, slew their children. He stepped into the dark of its once great temple, bow at the ready, and from the dark it arose, the great worm. He knew that a simple man could not best such a god, and he leaped away from its attack, climbing up one of its great columns. The great worm had a rival among the stars, beyond the reaches of time, and Njord drew his arrow and he fired. The snake's venom would find its mark. In pain, the great worm lashed out. Njord fell into the dark, dead. But the beast did not die. The worm reached into Njord's mind, connecting to all of his past lives. The horror bound him, but at his dying breaths, Njord made an oath that his spirit would return one day to destroy the worm if it were not dead. Meanwhile, in eternal Egypt, a place beyond time, Moon Knight watches as Khonshu and Conan fight against the great Set. Conan tries to strike Moon Knight, but the hero kicks him away. I'm not your enemy, you sword-swinging idiot! Moon Knight shouts. Enough! Khonshu rumbles, and the heroes turn to see the moon god holding Set aloft. This conflict is not between the brothers in Egypt or the warriors and even more ancient Stygia. It never has been, Khonshu tells the snake. Agreed, brother. Set nods, and the gods know that they now face a greater threat and must pool their strength. What little power remains of the great serpent will be used to mount our defense. Khonshu nods. No! You can't do this! My glory is eternal! Set shouts as he is crushed into Khonshu's hand. Khonshu turns to his warrior, ordering Mark to go to Stygia and deal with the threat head on, while he travels to unravel its spirit. If we fail, reality dies, Khonshu rumbles. Conan awakens to the sound of Agnes threatening the priestess of Set, but the snake woman shakes her head, informing Agnes that she is the only one who can save Conan. Why should I trust you for even an instant? Agnes snaps. Set told me to revive him. If I fail and he dies, then cut me down, Satine tells the red-haired woman. She leans in and begins to suck the poison from Conan's wound. Horrifying, Agnes notes. Satine suddenly rears back in pain, spitting the poison out of her own mouth. Welcome back to the land of the living, barbarian. You are felled and freed by the great serpent, Satine tells Conan as she doubles over in pain. Believe what you will. I know the truth about your fanged god. Conan snaps at her, and Satine can feel the change in the air, and she can feel the gods calling to them. We must answer, she whispers as she touches her bracelet. Meanwhile, over in Italy, Mark Spector looks into the barrel of Solomon Kane's pistol. Either you raise your head now and tell me Set has laid no claim to your soul, or I will blast your face into a fine red mist. Kane snarls at him. Moon Knight stands, pushing aside Kane's pistol. The moon calls to us, and we have to answer. They both appear in Stygia, standing before Conan and Agnes. Satine greets them, telling the group that they have been brought here to face a foe that threatens all of existence. The worm, she says to them. She explains that in every reality there exists a great power. In some it is a snake, in others it is a worm, a cosmic rivalry, an endless battle for dominance. Better to banish you both. Starting with you, snake woman. Kane snaps as he levels his pistol at the priestess, but Mark stops him, stating that he knows that they were used to weaken Set, to allow the worm to gain a foothold in their reality. Satine nods.
The gods will bless us if we fight to force the worm back beyond the veil, she tells him. Conan and Agnes agree, needing only to know where to strike the beast. Steel your souls, then ready your weapons, Satine tells them as she points, and with a roar of unholy might, the great worm arrives in their world. A mass of pulsing pink flesh, destroying the ground around them. Hundreds of eyes and great tentacles blink and writhe. A nightmare beyond existence. The warriors bellow a battle cry and they charge forward, and Conan and Agnes's blade cut into the monster's flesh, while Solomon Kane opens fire into its gaping maw. Moon Knight leaps onto the monster's back, attacking at its eyes, and they continue to battle, the warriors against the gods, trying to decide all of reality's fate. But the great worm is both weak and all-powerful in this reality. Khonshu appears, offering Mark a piece of the moon, of this moon and every moon that will be. Use it! Strike the beast! Khonshu commands, and the ghostly apparition appears, the spirit of Nord, who unleashes an arrow as Moon Knight attacks with his own power. The monster roars in pain and defeat, and it falls, and a glowing light seems to surround our heroes. Suddenly, all is still, and the monster is gone. The destruction of the city is almost complete, when suddenly boards and bricks are pushed aside and Conan stands. Anyone still alive, or am I the last? He calls out. There's only silence for a moment before. Cimmerian, I should have guessed you'd survive, Satine says as the barbarian finds her buried beneath the rubble. Are the others gone? Conan asks. She gasps in pain, her body smoldering from the power that she held. Sent back to their rightful place in the cosmos, while I, my mortal flesh, could not contain the godhood that it was given. She gasps. Conan looks at her, telling her that the village is destroyed and her life is forfeit. You are a misguided fool, woman, a deluded zealot who served an evil snake, and now you serve empty air. He spits at her. She continues, telling the Cimmerian that it was Set who brought him back from the dead. You know nothing! He cursed me with nightmares. The moon god brought me back after he killed your great serpent. You lie. Set is eternal, she gasps with her final breath. You'll find out soon enough, Conan whispers as he looks down at the body. Meanwhile, in France, Agnes opens up her eyes, lying in the village where she was attacked. Yet now it is bright and full of people going about their daily lives. She finds her friend still recovering from his wounds with no memory of the village having attacked him. Meanwhile, in Europe, Solomon Kane prays before the cross. His words spoken, he puts on his hat, stepping out the door. A woman stops him, asking if he is the man who hunts monsters. I destroy that which blasphemies life under the light of God, Kane says with a nod. The woman tells him a beast of a man is feeding on corpses nearby. Show me, Solomon says gruffly. And beyond time, Khonshu reaches into his palm, pulling out the small snake that Set has become. You spared me. Why such charity? Set asks, but Khonshu explains that he did it to maintain the balance, that without Set, the worm could return. But Set shakes his head, telling his brother that he would not have done the same for him, promising to eat Khonshu's followers. And with that, Mark Spector awakens, looking out into the moonlight, seeing a world that he does not recognize. In moments, he stands as Moon Knight, leaping out into the city to offer aid. And in Valusia, the Therian Age, a man brought before the great king known as Kull. The slayer of the Serpent men, Kull nods, questioning the robed figure. The man removes his hood, revealing his face to be James Addison. He smiles, offering Kull the box. My master fought a great war far from here. The day was lost. He now seeks allies to reclaim his kingdom and believes that you carry the courage that is required. I am here as a messenger, and I bring you a great gift as a sign of our deep admiration, James tells him. Kull takes the box, yet what his eyes don't see is a truly writhing worm. Together, the worm and Valusia can build an age undreamed of, James tells the king.
And there you have it, another video here at Comicstorian Full Story. Now, if you want to keep up to date with current comic books and see our videos as they're launched, please consider going to the main channel, Comicstorian. And you can also find us on Patreon at Comicstorian, and on Discord at Comicstorian, and on Twitter at Comicstorian, and on TikTok at Comicstorian. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.